I believe the first time I heard about the bisexual Superman was through a non-comic book related YouTube channel because well it exploded at the time. So we had a bunch of people that never touched a comic book and that will never touch a comic book talking about it and giving their opinions on the matter, even though they are not consumers of said product. And we had that like on both sides. So we had conservatives criticizing it for changing the character they knew and loved, but we also had progressives endorsing it in the name of representativity. And then there was me, being the liberal that I am, liberal as in how the entire rest of the world sees that word and not how Americans or US citizens sees the word liberal. So being the liberal that I am, I managed to disagree with both sides as usual. Nothing new to see in here. It's like I'm gonna go on a, I don't know, like progressive drug liberation parade, and in the same day you can find me on a anti-abortion parade. So yeah, I managed to like agree and also disagree with everyone. Buffs and debuffs of advertising for individual freedoms. But anyway, first of all, like I totally agree with the conservative take of make new characters. I fully believe that it's a better way of dealing with any type of representativity that you want to deal with. I think that's the best possible way to like create new stuff, so you don't piss people that enjoyed how whatever you're trying to change was. So go for it, create a new character. The problem is that this argument, which was the strongest conservative argument that I heard at the time, does not really apply in this case because, well, it is a new character. So we would have headlines saying stuff like Superman is now gay and woke. No whatever changed. The problem is that the headlines, like this type of headline, is kind of misleading. I'm not gonna be naive in here. I think they did that on purpose, because if they explained the situation better on the headlines, they would attract less clicks to their page. But anyway, as I was saying, it does not apply in this case. The conservative argument does not apply in this case because it's a new character. It's not Kal-El. Kal-El still remains straight, like you knew, and he just like is. He didn't even died. Like when some characters transfer their name to someone else, like when Batman, when not actually Batman, how's I can't believe I forgot the name. Um, when Dick Grayson became the Batman, that happened because Bruce died, which didn't even happen in Superman's case. Like he's still straight, he's still alive, he's just in another place. He's just doing other stuff, and it's even not like as if they just forgot about the character, because his adventure on this other planet is being told. Um, so you just have to look for it. Um, but it wasn't Kal-El, it was his son, Jonathan, which is a very recent character. And as far as I know, he never had his sexuality addressed, mostly because he was up to the up to this comic book. Um, he was still a kid. Then we have like a time skip. Well, not really a time skip, um, but we have space travel shenanigans that aged Jonathan. So now that he's like an adult, is the time they chose to address his sexuality. So he was a kid up to the previous comic book, so they never addressed his sexuality because of that. And I kind of like that. I kind of like this aspect of it. Like they waited until the character was fully grown up, and only then they addressed this part of his life. And when you go to previous comic books, when he was still a kid, he also didn't had a proper, I don't want to call it love interest, but let's say a crush. He never had a crush on any other character. Like there was a girl that lived next to the Kents, but that's all. And she will show up eventually. Not eventually. Occasionally, she would show up in the comic book, but as far as I know, it never went past a just a kid's friendship. And it also never gave signs of it going past that phase. And for that reason, I couldn't agree with people criticizing the change because, well, there was no change, there was character development. But on the other side, we had progressives endorsing the quote unquote change in favor of representativity, which also I can't really agree with because it felt cheap. Like the way they revealed John's sexuality was through leaking the gay kiss page, which happens in the fifth issue. And they did that before before the first issue got released, in what felt to be an attempt to bring more people into the comic book. So before they even started publishing it, they just leaked this huge thing that would still happen in 5 or 6 months. So it just felt kind of cheap. I wouldn't say it was like rainbow washing because, again, Jonathan's sexuality was never addressed, but it was definitely a marketing move to try to get more people to buy the comic books, which I don't know. It's just weird. Like there was no need for them to do that. Just publish the comic books and let people figure that out. You're just doing it, you're just like releasing a major spoiler for the story. But in a more personal level, do I really care about representativity? I wouldn't say so until I read, well, at least that's what I thought before reading this comic. But, well, we'll get to that later. So, going to the story. The comic book starts with Kal-El and Lois being scared of having a kid. So like the very first pages is Lois in the process of giving birth and having a little chat with Kal-El about them being scared of it because they don't know what could happen because the situation where they conceived the kid was very unusual. If I remember correctly, they were trapped in some sort of different dimension, and that removed Kal-El's powers. That temporarily removed Kal-El's powers, so he was able to conceive the kid with Lois. So it was a very unusual situation, and they don't know what could happen with the kid because he'll be a mix between Kryptonian and terrestrian. So maybe he will end up killing Lois during the birth process. So they are very scared of it, but they still decide to move on with that idea. Still thinking that no matter what happens, it was worth to risk having that kid. So like no matter if Lois end up dying during birth, no matter how the kid turns out to be, like if he grows up and end up being an anti-hero or maybe a villain, it does not matter, because at that moment they are happy with the decision they made and they think it's still worth to try it. And in that part of the comic there is some interesting things about family, but unfortunately nothing too deep about it. It's just like some random ideas thrown in there, and this is an element that will repeat itself during the entire comic book, during the entire story. But then we have a time skip because, well, in another comic book, Jonathan Kent goes in a space travel with Kal-El's father, and then Ultraman ends up trapping John in a inside a volcano for a bunch of years, and then when John is finally able to free himself, he goes back in time to the moment where he left. Like he leaves, and then, like from the point of view of Kal-El, young Jonathan lives with his grandfather, and then another John Kent comes back, now already grown up, because of space travel shenanigans. But let's say we had a time skip. And now Jonathan, like, he's unsure on how to proceed with his life. Well, besides the besides the biggest issue, which is, well, he lost about 10 years of his life. Besides that, his father is about to leave Earth to deal with problems on another planet. So now John has the problem of assuming the place as the new Superman, and the symbol he wears and the expectations that lie upon him. And then he decides to try to start smaller. He decides to try having a normal life, or at least continue the one that he had. So now he goes to a college. And at his first day, a school shooter appears out of nowhere, which makes John have to blow up his cover and to save everyone and stop that threat. And even though that was just to make the plot advance, I do believe they should have taken more time to develop it. Make him have at least one issue dealing with normal life stuff before something big happens. Make him go to college at least for a week. And then the school shooter could appear. Which they don't. They just the guy just steps on college, and then the school shooter immediately shows up. And the threat is dealt with really, really fast. It's the guy appears and leaves in less than 5 pages. That's how fast the threat is dealt with. There is not even John don't even stop for a moment to think of what to do and how to address that threat. But in that very short period of time where Jonathan was a normal person, in that very short period of time before he blew up his cover, he meets with Jay Nakamura, an independent journalist and soon to be the love interest of Jonathan, which again does not really get developed. A few issues later, we get introduced to the main villain, which is Bendix, the dictator of Gamorra, which is this nation that is supposed to be a paradise on Earth, but that people still try to flee from. So it's this supposed perfect country that everyone's needs is addressed, but at the same time we have people going inside improvised boats trying to flee from Gamorra. So you have Bendix and the weaponized post-humans, which are scientifically made super villains. Well, not really super villains. Bendix, he kidnaps people and he runs experiments on them to give them powers, and then he implants a bomb on their heads, just like on Suicide Squad, and he uses those people as villains. and he also wipes the memory of them, so they don't know like what is going on. Like some of them don't know what they are, who they are, and what's going on. Like there is one character that is on fire. He just wakes up in the middle of a forest and he's on fire, and the fire is triggered by his anxiety, or like his anxiety has a relation with that power. And I don't really like, I don't feel like that's the correct way. It's just he does not know how to control his power, and when he gets anxious, he loses control of it, thus causing the forest fire. And since now he's in the middle of a forest fire, his anxiety goes even higher, and that makes the issue worse. So that's like the idea behind the weaponized post-humans. A couple issues later, Bendix manages to put Jonathan in an overwhelmed state through the use of one of these post-humans, which I think is the fire guy. I think it's the same one that was causing the forest fire. So like the guy was causing the forest fire, Jonathan goes there, saves him, manages to like calm him down, and then send him to like a safe place on the Justice Hall. But then Bendix manages to get control over the fire guy once again and uses him against Jonathan. Or at least that's what I think it happens, because it's been quite some time since I read that. Like I think it was 2 months ago that I finished reading this story. But anyway, what matters is that Bendix managed to put Jonathan in this overwhelmed state, and now Jonathan is has his powers amplified, so he hears everything, he sees everything. He needs to be extra careful when handling stuff, because, well, he is really powerful. He is Superman. So he already needs to be careful, but now he is in a overwhelmed state, so he needs to be extra careful. And at that time, he, by hearing everything, he tries to save everyone, which burns him out. He gets into a burnt out state. He gets really tired of everything, and at that time, at that moment, Nakamura manages to help him out. So Jonathan flies to Nakamura's apartment because it's like the only friend he has. So he flies to Nakamura's apartment, and Nakamura managed to like help him out using a soundproof headphones, which is kind of dumb, but it's a superhero comic book. I'm not gonna find problems on everything they do. But anyway, and then on the next day, Jonathan wakes up. He thanks Nakamura for helping him, and that's the moment where we have the gay kiss. And that's basically it. That's all the development. That's the first 5 issues, right? I just summarized everything that happens from the beginning of the comic book up to the gay kiss, which happens on the fifth issue. And the comic book has, I think it's 18 issues, but nothing happens. Like they rushed a bunch of stuff on the five first issues, and then after that it becomes a generic superhero story. There is the villain, he is doing villain stuff, and we need to stop him, but there is no development. Like I was planning on doing the full comic book review. I was planning on our first video, I'm gonna talk about the five first issues, and then on the second video, I'll talk about the next five, but there is nothing to talk about. It's just that. It's Bendix doing villain stuff and Jonathan trying to stop with no real development. So, as I said before, the comic book has some good ideas in there, but unfortunately they don't explore them too deep. So we have the parents. The parents still decided to move on with the pregnancy, even without knowing for certain what's going to happen. Later on, we have Jonathan scared of the moment he'll lose his father, his hero, as he say, in one moment, because Kal-El is gonna go to another planet. At one point, Jonathan goes to a protest and allows himself to be arrested, which gives an interesting image of it, like the most powerful man in the world following the rules, which made me remember of Zack Snyder's Superman, at the moment where Superman allows the authorities to arrest him, and they handcuff Kal-El, even though the handcuffs will do nothing. So I like this image of Superman following the rules, even though if he wants to, he can just become the Earth dictator. There is an interesting dialogue between Jonathan Kent's grandfather, so Kal-El's adoptive father, and Batman, where Jonathan Kent's grandfather talks about the nights that he and Alfred stayed awake talking with each other, since they both were the father figure of powerful men. So Jonathan is talking with Batman about those moments where he and Alfred were talking, like expressing their concerns every time their sons left their house to like fight crime, which is a really important moment, because at this point in time Alfred is dead. But again, they don't really go that deep into it, which made the more introspective slash reflective moments, like the moments where characters are just talking to each other about about their expectations and concerns, feel too rushed. Like those moments where characters are just talking to each other, they feel too rushed. While on the other hand, the superhero part of it keeps dragging itself for too long without a proper development. Like as I said, the comic book has about 18 issues, if my memory is correct. So let's say we have 5 issues where they throw a bunch of mundane problems at the comic book, and everything's just too rushed. And then for the next 15 chapters, it's the same villain doing the same things over and over, and there is no development to it. And every time you see Bendix, he's just like, "Ooh, I'm the villain. I'm gonna do villain things. Ooh, be scared." So it's I don't know. It's not for me. Maybe if they had gone for something smaller, it would have worked better. Again, for me. Like if they had more dialogues and less fighting. Like right now, what comes to mind is Reservoir Dogs, Tarantino's movie about a jewelry store heist where we don't see the jewelry store heist. We just see what happens before and after that. And the entire movie is just characters talking with each other. So if they had gone for something like that, I think it would have worked better for me. And eventually, like, they would throw a villain or another between the talking, because well, it's a superhero comic book. So like, I was thinking of a smaller threat instead of a country dictator. They could have gone to something smaller, like a random gang, instead of the dictator with mind control equipment. Like, just make this random gang that is terrorizing Metropolis, and now John needs to deal with that. And by going with a smaller threat, they could properly develop the characters and their relationships, because it's a smaller issue, it's an easier to deal issue, so you can focus on all these other aspects of the story. Maybe if they went for a smaller series, like maybe 10 issues, half of it just fighting bad guys and the other half properly developing the characters. I don't know. It's just like, I'm just throwing random ideas as they come to mind. Maybe maybe I'm just like too old for this type of media. I don't know. Also, not really related to this story, but the artwork is all over the place. Like, they constantly change who's drawing and coloring the comic books to the point of it becoming tiring. It's like sometimes you have 2 or 3 issues with a artwork, and then they will switch again. They'll switch to an artwork, have 3 issues, and switch again. So it's terrible. And we are talking about Superman's comic book, right? Like, sure, it's Kal-El's son, but the comic book is still called Superman. And then there is also all the common comic book problems, like crossovers. During this read, I had to go to the Nightwing comic book one time because there was a crossover between those two, and I had to go back and forth to another comic book because they were doing, like, again, I think it was a 6-issue parts crossover. So it would be one in Jonathan's Kent comic book, another in Superman's comic book, and then back to Jonathan and back to Superman. So yeah, the crossovers, just like Marvel movies, where you have to watch a bunch of movies to just like understand what's going on, which I hated. And then there was, of course, the changes in the titles, which again, I just remember was another conservative argument. The changes in titles. I remember back in the day that the comic book was released, and then about 1 year later, they the story was over. So what I started to see was conservatives going like, oh, look, this story is terrible. It didn't sold any copies, so they have to conceal it. They have to pull the plug on bisexual Superman because, well, they didn't sold. If they had sold copies of it, the story would last more time instead of just 1.5 years. But then when I was reading this comic book, it didn't had it didn't got concealed. It just changed the title, which is funny. Like the story starts on Superman, son of Kal-El, and then that story finishes. At the end of it, Jonathan defeats Bendix, and the story ends in there. And then it continues on another comic book called Adventures of Superman, John Kent, which also finished. The story of that comic book, it's already over. So if you want to continue reading John Kent's adventures, you have to go to Beast World, because Beast World is about, I'm still reading this one, but Beast Boy is attacked by this intergalactic threat, and he gets ripped apart, and parts of him falls onto Earth, and that affects normal people and turns them into beasts. Or at least that's what I understood about it, because so far I've only read the first issue. But anyway, finishing Adventures of John Kent, you have to go to Beast World, and then after Beast World, you have to go to Beast World to Metropolis Tour. I think that's the one, which is a one-shot comic book that continues the story of Beast World, but focusing on Metropolis and, well, the Superman. So it's not like the story got concealed. It just changed the title because the story was over. So yeah, and I'm not like even counting the moments where Jonathan was still a kid, because like those stories ended and then changed the title. So the that argument of the story being concealed just does not make sense at all. But yeah, after all that, can I say I enjoyed the fact that Jonathan was bisexual? I guess so. A couple years ago, like when this comic book got released, I I had to say that I didn't got baited by it, first of all, because I saw the headline about Superman being bisexual, and I read the full page, so I understood that it was not Kal-El, it was Jonathan. And at that time, if you asked me about it, I would just say that I don't really care about the character's sexuality, because there is more stuff you can use to relate to a character. And there is more important stuff you can use to relate to a character, like his sense of moral and justice, maybe the character's hobbies, like Flash. Flash is a scientist, and I really like that idea. And it has nothing to do with his sexuality. So at the time, that was my main mentality about this issue. Right now, I feel like I'm still on the same, kind of at the same place. Yes, there is more important stuff you can use to relate to a character, but at the same time, there are issues, there are specific issues that you need specific character traits to address. And sexuality is one of those. You won't be able to address bisexual problems if there is no bisexual in your art piece. But well, you can do that whatever way you feel like would be better for your project. So that's where I stand right now. And in this comic book, that happens. There are some issues like coming out to your parents where, well, you would need a gay character to do that. You can have a story about coming out to your parents about your sexuality if you never address sexuality in any way during your project. But analyzing the story, would I say that, I don't know, if I ever decide to do a drawing about Superman, or let's say if I ever decide to do a cosplay of Superman, I'll go to Jonathan instead of Kal-El. But I don't know if that's because of his sexuality. That like I can see myself in the character better. Like he has the same traits as he has the same traits as Kal-El. But on top of that, there is the added part of the sexuality. So if I ever decide to do any of those things, yeah, I'll probably go, like let's say if I decide to do a Superman cosplay, yeah, I'll probably go towards Jonathan. But there is again another problem, which is I didn't read much of Kal-El comic books, so I would have to do that before to just to like be sure. The problem is, will I ever cosplay Superman? No, that's that's a hard pass for me because Superman doesn't matter if it's Kal-El or if it's Jonathan or whatever variant of Superman we have. Superman is not on my top 5 favorite superheroes. So like maybe, just maybe, Jonathan's sexuality maybe made it get to my top 10. But even with that, I'm still not sure. Like, I feel like I need to read more Superman stuff to be sure about that. Like, if I ever decide to cosplay a superhero for whatever reason, I'm probably going with Flash, or maybe Nightwing, or maybe Batman, or Hal Jordan. They are all characters that I enjoy more than Superman. But again, I never read that many Superman comic books. Like, I read Death of Superman, I read a little bit of the New 52, and then I read um, Son of Kal-El and Adventures of John Kent. That's all. And the movies was just Zack Snyder's. I don't remember seeing any other movie. Oh, and I also started the Smallville TV show, but didn't finish it. I think I didn't got past the second season on that. Um, but yeah, it was interesting to see some life aspects I could identify with in that comic book. Um, the representativity part of it was just, if it was done in a proper way, I would have enjoyed it more. Like really addressing some issues instead of just throwing at the screen. Um, and I don't know, cheap representativity is not what I'm looking for in a story. Um, and in this one, it's just like it lacks in depth. Um, but yeah, was the drama worth? Definitely not. As I said before, the main argument against it was that they should create new characters instead of changing old ones. But as I said, they did that. Like, Jonathan is a new character, and as far as I know, he didn't have his sexuality addressed. While the main argument in favor of it was that we need more representativity, which is, I don't know, is not all we need. The sexuality of a character is an important part of it, but it's just a small part of it. And dropping some keywords here and there won't magically improve the story. You need to properly develop those characters, and this comic book does not do that. I still have doubts if the marketing stunt worked or not. I know it made more people talk about the comic book. Like people that never touched the comic book was talking about this topic. But what I don't know is if that managed to convert those people into readers, or if the marketing stunt was just made to mislead investors. Like they just got into a meeting and say like, "Oh, look how many people are talking about this. Please give us more money, invest on us. It's a possibility." Um, and I don't know. We can speculate about it, but only Detective Comics knows the answer for that. Um, and then there was the people close to me, um, the conservatives I know, would complain about the change. Like at the time, I had a very conservative friend. Um, well, not really at the time. A little bit before the comic book got released, we stopped talking with each other after a while. But um, this friend of mine, I believe he would complain about the quote unquote change, but they never read the comic book before, so nothing changed for them. And the progressives that I knew at the time would celebrate it. Would They would cheer about Superman being bisexual, but they after they announced it, those people didn't started reading comic books because of the of Superman now being bisexual. So nothing changed for them too. um, so I don't know if the marketing stunt worked or not. Like I don't know if more people started reading the comics. Because at the time I didn't knew anyone that read comic books. I knew people that complained and people that celebrated, but none of them read. um, yeah, and then the only stupid enough person to go after it was me, like the only one that I know, because I was curious to see like how they would pull that off. So when they started releasing the comic book, I remember like reading a little bit of it. I think I got to the gay kiss part of it, but then I dropped it because I didn't want it like wait every month for a new issue. So I just dropped the comic book, and recently they announced the white Black Panther. Now they quote unquote changed the color of the Black Panther, and I got remembered about the Superman sexuality quote unquote change. And then I went after the comic book to like see if they had finished it. So yeah, just now that I read the full story. But yeah, since I am always late for the trends, which is the main idea of this channel, is to like talk about stuff after the hype dies out. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Stay tuned, because in about 1 or 2 years, I'm gonna talk about the white Black Panther. I'll just wait until the hype dies out. I'll wait until like after everyone talks about it, and then only then I'll bring my point of view on that quote unquote change, because it's the same. Like I can like give you a preview of what I'm gonna talk about in that future video. It does not matter. That's my point of view. It's the same situation as Jonathan's sexuality. It's a totally new character. They are not changing T'Challa's skin color. They created a new character. But we still have conservatives laughing because now they are doing the other way. Instead of making white characters black, they are making black characters white. And we have progressives complaining about the change, even though it's not a change. But yeah, that's about it. Now, how do I end the recording again? I think it's clicking here.